The smell of oil paint and turpentine clung to the air as Naomi Ellis adjusted the canvas in the corner of her one-bedroom studio apartment in Harlem. At 29, she had grown used to working in tight spaces, balancing easels between stacks of books and eating dinner at the same desk where she mixed pigments. Her art was bold, vibrant, textured portraits of black women in surreal landscapes. Her work didn't whisper, it declared. But outside her small creative world, Naomi had yet to be seen. For years, she'd been submitting her work to galleries across New York. Some responded with polite rejections, others ignored her entirely. But this week felt different. She'd been accepted into a local art showcase in Soho, the kind of sleek, glass-walled gallery where names are made and deals are whispered behind champagne flutes. It wasn't a solo exhibit, just a group show. But it was a foot in the door. Naomi arrived early the day of the installation, her painting wrapped in a protective sheet and carried carefully in her arms like a child. It was her newest piece, 6 feet tall, layered in rich hues of gold, sienna, and indigo. It depicted a black woman seated on a throne made of blooming magnolias and broken chains, her eyes both soft and defiant. She titled it, Inheritance. Inside the gallery, the walls gleamed white, the lighting was surgical, and the energy was cold. She approached the reception desk, where a thin white man in designer glasses was flipping through a list. "Artists check in here?" she asked, trying to sound confident. He barely looked up. "Name?" "Naomi Ellis. I'm exhibiting Inheritance." He squinted, then sighed. "Right, the Harlem girl? You're in the back section." His tone was flat. "We've got the main floor reserved for our collectors' favorites. You'll be near the refreshments." Naomi's stomach tightened. The curator said all pieces would be displayed equally. He smirked without warmth. "We curate based on interest. No offense, but collectors in this space, they expect a certain kind of sophistication." Naomi said nothing. She'd heard it before. Urban. Bold. Not for this demographic. As she unwrapped her painting and leaned it against the wall in the assigned corner, she overheard the man whisper to another gallery employee, "She's got passion, I'll give her that. But this isn't exactly Sotheby's material." The two chuckled. Naomi didn't flinch, didn't turn around. She placed her painting upright, adjusted the lighting herself, and stepped back. Let them laugh. She wasn't here to impress them. She was here to be seen. Opening night shimmered under the gallery's halogen lights, like a dream dipped in white wine and designer labels. The walls glowed with works from well-known artists, abstract pieces, polished sculptures, portraits that all seemed to echo the same voice. Safe, familiar, comfortable. Naomi stood near her assigned corner, sipping sparkling water from a plastic flute, watching the crowd swirl past her. Nobody stopped. Visitors made polite loops around the main installations, murmuring words like composition and austere palette. Naomi's section, the refreshment zone, sat to the side, closer to the door to the service kitchen than the heart of the show. She smoothed her braids and straightened the hem of her rust-colored blouse. Inheritance stood proud behind her, its golden tones catching the warmest light in the room, defiant and regal. But still, people passed by with barely a glance. Until she heard it. A voice, soft, confident, unfamiliar. "Oh, this is the one." Naomi turned. An older woman in a tailored white coat and silver jewelry stood before the painting, eyes wide. She was alone, unaccompanied by the groups of gallery regulars, sipping wine and snapping selfies. She leaned in closer to the painting, as if trying to breathe it in. "This is extraordinary," the woman whispered. Naomi stepped forward. "Thank you. I'm Naomi, the artist." The woman turned, surprised. "You made this?" Naomi nodded. The woman paused, then offered her hand. "Sophia Delacroix. I collect for private clients across Europe and the Middle East. This is unlike anything else in this gallery." Naomi blinked. You really think so?" Sophia smiled. "Art is about story. And this one doesn't ask for permission. It tells you what it is." At that moment, the gallery owner, and the same man who'd laughed earlier, noticed Sophia, standing in Naomi's corner. He approached quickly, his smile a little too polished now. Ms. Delacroix, welcome. Didn't expect to see you so early. If you'd like, I can walk you through the main. She waved him off. I've seen enough. I want this piece. She pointed directly at Inheritance. The gallery owner blinked. Oh, that's part of the emerging artists section. I'm sure we can find something more aligned with... No, she said, voice sharper now. This is the only piece that moved me tonight. Name your price. Naomi stood frozen. The gallery owner forced a laugh. Well, it hasn't been evaluated. We hadn't expected... 2 million, Sophia said calmly. If the artist is willing to part with it. Naomi felt her heart slam against her ribs. I would be honored, she managed to say. A hush began to spread through the room as others picked up bits of the conversation. The same guests who had walked past her earlier were now glancing over, curious. The gallery owner smiled tightly. Of course. We'll handle the paperwork immediately. But Sophia turned to Naomi directly. Actually, I'd prefer to deal with you. My clients don't like middlemen who overlook genius. Naomi smiled, just slightly. And the man who laughed at her earlier? He stood silent, watching as power and money passed right through him, and into the hands of the woman he never believed deserved to be here. By the next morning, Naomi's inbox was flooded. Next, the news had spread, not through tabloids or press releases, but through whispers in all the right circles. A little-known black artist from Harlem had just sold her first major piece for $2 million. The art world, always hungry for a new name to champion, suddenly remembered the corner where she had stood, the painting they had ignored, the laugh they'd overheard. Now, they were all listening. Naomi sat at her laptop in stunned silence as the emails poured in. We'd love to feature you in our upcoming Women of Color in Art Showcase. Our gallery in Chelsea has an opening this fall. Would you consider a solo exhibition? A profile for Vogue's Creative Voices series. Are you available for an interview next week? Suddenly, her name was on people's lips. Her silence, once mistaken for invisibility, was now being rebranded as mystique. But Naomi hadn't changed. They had. Her phone buzzed again, this time from a familiar number. It was Andre, the gallery owner. Naomi? He said smoothly when she answered. I wanted to apologize if I came off dismissive at the event. We were caught off guard, that's all. You know how these things go. Naomi didn't speak right away. He continued. We'd be honored to represent your work. I think it's time we talk about a full partnership. The buzz is real. People are asking about you. She let the silence stretch for a moment longer, then, you laughed at me. There was a pause. It was never personal. Just business. Naomi exhaled, calm and composed. Exactly. And I've decided I'll be doing mine. Elsewhere. Click. She placed the phone down, heart pounding, not with fear, but clarity. For the first time in her life, she wasn't chasing approval. She wasn't waiting for a seat at their table. She was the table now. That afternoon, she called Sophia Delacroix, who had already wired a deposit. I'm ready to paint the next piece, Naomi said. Sophia's response was instant. Take your time. But when you're ready, the world will be watching. Naomi looked at her easel. A fresh canvas stood there, blank, full of possibility. This time she wouldn't paint from hunger, not from desperation, not from the need to be seen. She would paint from power. Naomi didn't return to Soho the following week. She didn't need to. Instead, she stayed in her studio. Lights dimmed just the way she liked them, candles burning low near her paint jars, music humming softly in the background. Old Nina Simone, new Solange, no lyrics that didn't speak to her soul. She painted, but not for them. Her strokes were bolder now, less cautious, no longer worried about whether a gallery would approve or whether a collector might misunderstand her palette. Her brush moved with freedom, even joy. This next piece wasn't a response to anyone. It was a declaration. In the middle of that quiet Harlem room, Naomi created something that didn't just ask for space, it took it. Meanwhile, beyond her four walls, the ripples had become waves. A major art blog published a feature titled, The Artist You Ignored, The Voice You Can't Unhear, Naomi Ellis. They wrote about the gallery showcase, about the $2 million sale, about how many had passed her by that night, until one woman didn't. Suddenly, people who had once dismissed her were now trying to claim her. The gallery updated its website, placing a blurry photo of Naomi next to its list of featured emerging artists, as if she had always been theirs. A representative even reached out to her via DM with a casual, "Hope we can collab again soon." Naomi didn't answer. Instead, she posted a picture of her painting Inheritance, not with the gallery name, but with a caption, "Power doesn't need permission." Thousands liked it. Hundreds shared it. But Naomi didn't care about virality. She cared about integrity. A week later, she was invited to speak at an event for young black women in the arts. She almost said no, but then she thought about how many Naomis were out there right now, painting in kitchens and basements, wondering if their voices mattered. So she stood before the crowd, not as a symbol, not as a sudden success, but as a mirror. She told them what no one had told her. You don't have to soften your art to be accepted. You don't have to wait for permission to take up space. And when they laugh at you, just know, sometimes laughter is fear in disguise. And for the first time in her life, Naomi watched an audience listen to every word. 6 months later, Naomi stood in a space that once existed only in her imagination. It wasn't in Soho. It wasn't curated by someone else. And it definitely didn't have a wine bar or forced smiles. It was a converted warehouse in Brooklyn. High ceilings, exposed brick, and massive white walls waiting to be filled. The sign outside read simply, Ellis House. Inside, Naomi was hosting her first independent show, but not just for her work. Tonight was about them. 10 emerging black artists, many showing their work publicly for the first time, stood beside their pieces while guests walked through the space. These artists weren't household names. They didn't have wealthy patrons or art degrees from elite institutions. What they had was raw truth, and Naomi made sure their truth had room to breathe. She had funded the space with a portion of the Inheritance sale. The rest, she invested in a small team, a grant writer, a community manager, and a youth mentorship coordinator. Ellis House would be more than a gallery. It would be a school, a studio, a platform. As the crowd moved through the space, Naomi watched from the side, not needing to be the center. Her joy came from watching a teenage girl, eyes wide, notebook clutched to her chest, stop in front of a painting by a 19-year-old trans artist from the Bronx. The girl whispered, "I've never seen anything like this." Naomi smiled. That was the point. Later that night, a familiar face appeared in the crowd, the same gallery owner from Soho. This time, he wasn't laughing. He looked around, stunned at the turnout, the energy, the press quietly photographing the work. He approached her with a weak smile. "This is, impressive," he offered. Naomi looked him in the eye and replied calmly, "This is just the beginning." He tried to ask about collaborating again. She let him finish, then turned away to greet a young artist on her roster, because Naomi Ellis no longer needed validation from institutions that never saw her to begin with. She had built her own, and as she stood beneath her name etched into the brick wall, not just as an artist, but as a founder, a leader, a visionary, she finally understood. They didn't laugh because she didn't belong. They laughed because they never expected her to lead. And now, they had no choice but to follow. Far across the Atlantic, in a quiet private gallery nestled inside a Parisian townhouse, Naomi's painting Inheritance now hung in a place of honor. Sophia Delacroix had placed it at the center of her curated collection, a room usually reserved for Picassos, Rothkos, and rare African sculptures from the 18th century. But Inheritance dwarfed them all, in color, in soul, in meaning. Every high-profile guest who walked into the room stopped in their tracks. It didn't matter what language they spoke or what wealth they held. The painting demanded attention. Some asked where it came from. Some assumed it was a legacy piece. But Sophia always smiled and said, "She's alive, young, and just getting started." She told the story often, of the overlooked artist, the gallery corner, the laughter, and the moment she saw it. Truth, carved in oil and fire. Back in New York, Naomi was beginning work on a new series titled Unframed. It would challenge gallery conventions by installing art in public spaces, on abandoned walls, school buildings, and community centers across underserved neighborhoods. No security guards, no entry fees, art where it lived. Naomi was no longer just painting portraits. She was creating moments of recognition for people who'd never seen themselves immortalized. And with every piece she painted, a quiet revolution spread. From Brooklyn rooftops to university lectures, from fashion campaigns to children's books, from whispered doubt to undeniable truth. The woman they laughed at, she became a movement, not because they eventually accepted her, but because she never needed them to.